Good evening, good morning, good night, or good day to you all. We're back with Document TV International for the second time this week. And as usual, I have the honor and pleasure of having Mr. Charles Ortel with me from New York. How are you, Charles?
Well, I have to slightly correct you. I'm from what's left of New York, which isn't much.
Yes. But you're still in what's left of New York. That's good, and it's good to see you as always. We have a lot on our menu today, so even though we spoke just a few days ago, let's start with a surprise thing that hasn't been mentioned much in Norwegian media, and I don't know. Of course, it was hyped in the U.S. The White House had a very special visitor last night, or was it the night before, Charles?
I think it was just recently, and we don't need to worry about her stealing the White House drapes because she wore them to the event.
Exactly.
People were giving her a very hard time about her choice of wardrobe. This is a person who has been inside the White House for 30 years, right? First Lady, 8 years. And then off and on for various reasons. And she, by all accounts, actually, and there are many accounts written of the Clinton presidency, it was she who was directing the earliest days when there was so much chaos, when they had difficulty getting people across the line confirmed in the Senate. It was she who was, some argue, responsible for most of Bill Clinton's early missteps. And I think ever since she arrived at the White House, she's probably felt that she should have been president, not Bill. And so it must very much upset her that she lost as badly as she did in 2008 to Barack Obama. And then in 2016, they're the fire engines coming to take me away, I guess, in the background. Sorry.
No worries.
So she was there ostensibly for an art ceremony, but I think what's really going on is the Democratic Party elders understand there's a vacuum. And that vacuum is the fact that it is just obvious to anybody who isn't an idiot that that Joe Biden is unlikely, frankly, to serve out his term as president, and is most unlikely to actually be either the Democratic nominee or the eventual winner in 2024.
Holy Molito, Charles. Do you think that lady with the drapes and all, is she seriously eyeing her final chance to get into the White House as the president?
Absolutely. I mean, they do this stuff well. You have to remember the Clintons have cultivated the power elite on the left ever since Bill was governor. And they now also count the Bush family and some rhinos as their friends. So they see, I think, a pretty clear path towards Hillary not really running, but being installed as president. That's, I think, the goal of anybody other than Joe Biden and Kamala Harris right now. They watch 2020, you can say what you want about 2020, and you can reach the conclusions that you want to reach about it. But it's very clear that Joe Biden did not really mount a campaign. He was dusted off in the Democratic primaries in the first debate by Kamala Harris. He did horribly. And then the elite said, you know what, let's stick him in, make him the candidate. They made him the candidate, but he didn't run. So Hillary watches that, Michelle watches that, others watch that and say, you know, if I don't have to actually run, and if I don't actually have to debate, what's wrong with just getting installed?
Are we looking at another Richard Nixon and Spiro Agnew, Gerald Ford affair coming up?
I think we are, and I think we have been for some time. I mean, the way this kind of stuff tends to work is the insiders, and particularly, in particular, Biden's advisors and other senior Democrats, they know a lot more than we know about just how bad Biden's situation actually is. You don't have to be a genius to look at somebody as incompetent as Joe and as stupid as Hunter and then ask yourself, how does this family end up with 2 gigantic mansions following a life of, quote, public service by Joe Biden? You don't need to go and look at the bank accounts and the wire transfers to understand this stinks. And now I think, having said there was nothing there, having orchestrated that letter, the 51 spy chiefs and all that in 2020, having done all that, only to find out that he's really dirty, and perhaps a lot dirtier than we all understand, I think it's Democrats who are pushing him out. And Democrats inside media, which is basically Democrats, pushing him out. And we'll see how hard he resists.
He won't resist. I mean, he belongs down back. He needs to go back in the basement with the other mothballs. But Charles, you don't need to look at bank statements. You don't need to read liberal media at all in order to find out what's going on. You don't need to go anywhere to find analysis, which you have proven, because you're the one giving the analysis. I'm just here trying to drag them out of you, because you sent me a mail this afternoon about Washington Post and New York Times now arguing that old Grandpa Joe is too old. This is what you've been saying for months, really, and watch us, Document TV International. You can support us by donating to PayPal at document.no. Don't forget to watch Crowdsource the Truth with Jason Goodman and the Right Honorable Charles Ortel out of what's left of New York. Back to track. Speaking about the Bidens, and speaking about intelligence, you mentioned that in what you just told us now. I think we can clearly write off Grandpa, but his son, Hunter, that is, has not shown extreme talent in that direction either. I heard he sued a former Trump aide in the White House for releasing the laptop papers.
Yeah, I mean, these are desperate acts. And if you look at Hunter Biden's life, it's a desperate life. That would be perhaps the title of his next biography. This is a child of privilege, of political privilege, who has gone from addictive behavior to excessive opportunity, undeserved wealth, undeserved access to power his whole life. And he's never really been punished. And here I'm talking not simply about Hunter, he's following his father's example. I mean, his father has never really been punished. He's gone from undeserved strength to undeserved strength. And we think back now to something that Robert Gates, who was our defense secretary under Obama, the first defense secretary under Obama, he said in his book that Joe Biden has screwed up every significant national policy, and I think also economic decision he's ever made in his career. And now we see that. His entire presidency, the only person who's happy right now is Jimmy Carter, because until very recently, Jimmy Carter was the most disastrous Democratic modern president. Now it's crystal clear. Joe Biden is plumbing new depths on a daily basis, and his son and family have been milking his quote public service for almost 50 years now, and it's got to stop. It isn't exposed, and if they aren't punished, this will only encourage the other grifters who look at this easy way of doing things. Crooked political donors who are willing to give you money, you get the job, you do what you're told, and you get a payday, a significant payday. And you fly around the world congratulating yourself for all of the sacrifices that you've been making on behalf of a grateful nation. I mean, it's a formula that's broken. It's broken for the private sector. It's broken for the taxpayers. And it's destroying America's standing in the world if we don't do something about it.
Definitely. And you have two more proofs of the sewage streaming out of the White House and the Biden Incorporated. We have, for instance, this Mr. Holtzman, Bank of Rwanda, Who's he?
Well, there's a story. Remember, initially, when Biden, the candidate, and then I guess in the presidential debate, when he wanted to deflect any questions about how exactly he's amassed his wealth, he would say, listen, I don't talk business with any family members. There's a hard wall between me and whatever my family may choose to do. And there's a phrase in investment banking of a Chinese wall. That's a wall that's not a wall. And it now appears crystal clear with this latest story. This is a guy named Holtzman who allegedly somehow was able to get a meeting inside the vice presidential residence with Joe Biden and with Hunter and others to discuss a project that Holtzman was connected to in Kazakhstan, where he wanted to have a link up between that natural gas providing country and Burisma. And he was trying to get some kind of letter written or some kind of benefit out of it. This is the kind of stuff that, first of all, Joe obviously was involved in it. You don't get somebody like Holtzman inside the vice presidential residence without Joe knowing about it. And he had no business having such a meeting. And this comes weeks and months after, Dan Goldman and other idiots, Democratic idiots in the House are saying there's no evidence, there's no evidence. There's a mountain of evidence. This reeks to high heaven. This is yet another piece in the saga. And I think we're close to a point where even Democrats are going to come out and say, we had no idea it was this outrageous. We need to, as Romney has done in the Republican Party, he's making the argument that he's too old to serve, and we need a new generation of leadership. You're going to hear that, I think, from Democrats imminently.
But let's stay to, you mentioned the Chinese wall. There's another story about this Inga, Chinese spy chief, in the words of Hunter Biden himself. A Mr. Ho, who got incarcerated and sentenced to, I don't know how many years he got, but new evidence about his dealings with the Biden family has recently surfaced, hasn't it?
Yeah, so here the contrast is stunning. In the case of Trump, we have debunked allegations, which are still brought out into the public domain now as if they were true. Debunked allegations that Trump was doing the bidding of Vladimir Putin on the basis of the Steele dossier and other alleged evidence. So that animates the whole political discourse globally for 7 years, or how many years it has been. And in contrast, somehow only now do we learn that the FBI, DOJ, and the FISA court was surveilling this Patrick Ho and was in the process of doing that, or whatever his first name is, Ho. In the process of doing this, they became aware that the Biden family was very actively involved through Hunter and perhaps involving Joe and other family members, trying to concoct deals with the effing spy chief of China. And, how could the FBI and DOJ not have done something about this? How could Obama not known this? I mean, these allegations concern a period when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States. You're telling me that nobody close to Barack Obama, that Valerie Jarrett, for example, or Brennan, the CIA director, nobody would have gone to Obama prior to the November 2016 election and said, we have a serious problem with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden. Let's hope it doesn't come out before the 2016 election, but we've got to do something about this. Instead of going down that course of taking corrective action, they just let the Biden family amp up their corrupt enterprises once Barack Obama left the White House. It's outrageous.
It is outrageous. And it is, we all recall the letter the statement by the 51 present and former intelligence chiefs of November 2021, who said that all this talk about Hunter Biden's laptop is Russian disinformation, which leads me, I'll take a little detour, but we can call it intelligence at your convenience, or convenient intelligence. And before we go to the core of that story, stay tuned, I want to share with you that last night I went to a document meeting where we had a show. We saw in a movie an hour and a half from South Africa. Apartheid 20 years on. And it's made by the British-Swedish filmmaker Pelle. Sorry, his name lapsed me. I'll write it in. Say again, Lars?
Taylor.
Pelle Taylor, Lars, thank you. And it was very, very sobering and, what should I say, scary movie. Right. Because South Africa, which is far away, is more or less falling apart due to the unrestricted ANC rule, due to the so-called black empowerment policies, which makes sure that people with no merit gets a position as, building engineer or building bridges, roads, railways, whatnot, having absolutely no clue on why they're there except their skin color. It was also about the Boers, the Afrikaners, reorganizing themselves, doing a lot of, because they don't have a place to go. They were not Brits. They couldn't go back to the UK. And it's South Africa. It's worthwhile taking a look at what's happening in South Africa. They have the third highest crime rate in the world after Venezuela and Papua New Guinea, and before Afghanistan. Now, one thing there I connected to, and it's to the topic. It is rumored that British MI6, British intelligence, recruited a lot of ANC members, and there's even whispers about Nelson Mandela having been recruited. And it's without a doubt, foreign intelligence played a big role in eliminating the rivals of African National Congress, the Inkatha movement, the Zulu movement led by Buthelezi at the time. And they had scuffles, but Inkatha was largely peaceful until suddenly they became victims of a PSYOPs operation, and they were, some of them were bumped off in, killed. And there's a lot of things we don't know. And that brings me, we're not going to go further into South African affairs right now, but we're going to go to the last piece by Seymour Hersh. And it was his phrase, intelligence or convenient intelligence, and he goes back to the red line that allegedly were drawn by President Obama during the war in Syria, which, by the way, is still going on. And he said if the Syrian regime continue their atrocities and their killing off rebels, they, and he said, actually, they have crossed the red line after a gas attack in Ghouta, where some allegedly 1,500 people were killed. And miraculously, footage came out of Ghouta. The rebels hold the town, Fastest, H-E-L-L. And I didn't buy the story then. Did you buy the story then, that this was done by the regime?
Not at all. And I think Hersh's piece is another superb contribution to the discourse. He doesn't mention specifically who was head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, but I believe, Jason and I were checking into that, I believe it was Michael Flynn. So the essence of the story is the Defense Intelligence Agency said, now, wait a minute, before you blame this on the regime, there's conflicting evidence here, and it may well not be the regime that did this. Somebody made a decision not to let that information get to the President of the United States. And if I were running a business, let's say, and I found out that a subordinate, because the DIA chief is a subordinate to the CEO, was not telling me, or not making sure that I got critical information, I'd fire that person on the spot to send a message to all the other people to report to me. That didn't happen. Well, it didn't happen quickly enough. And so this is, when we see these horrifying tales, how many different times have the United States and our allies entered into the project of nation building on the basis of a false tale? I think of Iraq as one case. And look at the disaster in Iraq today.
And in Libya, where now maybe as many as 30,000 people have drowned due to a dam collapsing on Derna. Peace be on their souls. But back to Ghouta, because I had a personal take on that as well. I did not go into Syria in that year, but it was in Obama's time, and I was on the border. Actually, I was there with the Peshmerga fighting. They were fighting. I wasn't, but I was on the front line facing Daesh. And Syrian friends fighting Daesh, not with the regime, said that this is Daesh stuff. The regime is bad. They were against the regime, but they said this gas attack is a false flag operation. They want the U.S. to bomb the smithereens out of Damascus. That's what they want. They want to destroy Syria completely. And I have friends back in Norway, coming from Syria, hailing from Syria, who also fled from the regime and who are absolutely not any Daesh or Islamic State people. They told me the same, but I didn't have hard evidence. And if you recall, Charles, he was Seymour Hersh, after he broke the Nord Stream story, he was ridiculed in the few media outlets that initially registered that he had blown the lid on the Nord Stream, another false flag operation most likely, and said he was the one who claimed that Daesh, Islamic State, used gas on their own people in Ghouta. Hey, come on. And this is, and they used it to discredit him. I mean, he was without the credibility because he said something so stupid. Now, today, Seymour Hersh on his Substack published 4 or 5 pages from that handwritten memo that he got hold of, emanating out of the DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, with his notes on. I'm not going to destroy his Substack account. I'm a subscriber myself, but I'm going to leave the address and you can subscribe. I might include one of the pages for you viewers to peruse, but don't mess with Seymour Hersh. He knows what he's talking about. That said, let's go to another most likely false flag operation took place in the Donbass area, the Russian-held territory, which voted for where the 90%, 95%, what do I know, are Russians. Okay, one thing is that they are being hammered by Ukrainian artillery day and night, and they're definitely not only shooting at military positions, they are shooting at residential buildings, but it's not reported. That's one thing. Now, also in a town bordering to the Donbass region, and people, you have to excuse me for not pronouncing these Ukrainian Russian names correctly, but I think it was called Moskovskaya or something like that, where 14 or 16 people were killed in what was purportedly done by a Russian shell. Now, it was all over the news. Maybe it was last Tuesday, last Wednesday, and then suddenly everything died out. even and prominent German commentators who cannot be taken for being pro-Russian in any way weren't on Twitter, I think, ex-Twitter, or on German television and said, hey, wait a second. That show, you can see the reflection on a car because you had a video from it. And that direction, there are no Russians, only Ukrainians. That shell had to be fired by the Ukrainians. Whether it was done on purpose or not, we don't know. But definitely, the Russian got blamed for something that they did not do.
Well, I mean, welcome to what the West has decided to do to Russia. I mean, I think the larger question here, the biggest question facing NATO members is, do we really want to continue on a project that is not actually a defensive project? Do we want to have this collection of people in NATO in search for a crisis in which we might want to intervene? Or have we done enough damage to our own reputations and our own economies and our own people by rushing into these very complex problem areas without really understanding what the issues are, how to solve them, and not really in search necessarily of solutions? I think NATO, after 1991-92, the NATO's mission needs to be reduced, not increased. And the goal of NATO should be to go out of existence, that we should have actually, after more than a century of European-centered, you could call them world wars, after having more than a century of that, perhaps the mission should be for Europe and the United States to be less militant, more inward focused, more dedicated to actually protecting and preserving our own populations within our own borders. Because we're certainly agents of mayhem, it would seem, around the world in too many places.
We are. And Charles, I'm old enough, and strangely enough, I cannot say that I was ever opposed to Norway being a member of NATO, because I perceived NATO way back as a guarantee for peace, because the power imbalance was maintained that way, to phrase Tom Lehrer. Now, NATO has made a 180 degrees turnover. NATO is a guarantee for war and mayhem, has become a guarantee for war and mayhem. And take the dictator Kim Jong-il of North Korea visiting Putin, and reportedly Putin is going to go and pay him a visit too. I have no sympathy at all with Mr. Kim Jong-il. I have sympathy for the North Korean people, as I have sympathy for Russian people, for people of all colors, of all creeds. But look at what we've done now. I mean, how wise was it to act like NATO could just swallow up all of Europe, including Russia, and just dismantle Russia totally? Where has that led us? Has that made Europe any more safe? No. On the contrary, I mean, Putin, and I think the genius in the State Department, Mr. Blinken, actually alluded to that when he said that, well, this is not good. I mean, China, Putin is allying with China and other dictators in Asia. This is not good. Well, you don't have to be a genius, Mr. Blinken, to see that this is the outcome of what you and the Norwegian-born Secretary General of NATO has, where you have led us. And one thing on that, sorry, Charles, one thing on that, because I had a radio show this morning, and, yesterday, Ursula von der Leyen, the known trickster in academia, now president of the European Union, had her State of the Union address yesterday. There's a lot to be said about that. I won't go into detail, but she has also recently said that, hey, Russia is flooding our markets with cheaply built electrical cars. They have to stop that. Well, Mrs. Lane, I think maybe you were not a signatory to the Paris Agreement, but you allowed China to build as many coal plants as they needed, while you strangled the European economy and the European energy sector, including the Norwegian, and made us all to switch over to electric cars. And today China retorted, "Hey, Ursula, go easy. Don't you dare stop or put sanctions on our electrical cars." What a mess.
Yeah. I mean, it's as if you're in a village and you have one family that is constantly fighting. There's not enough food on the table. It's a filthy hovel of a home. And the children are crying, and there are too many children, and they're not getting educated properly, and they don't have any savings for retirement, and they've got medical challenges. And that family decides that they're going to dictate to the rest of the village how the village should run village affairs. That's what's going on now. In America, I opened by saying what's left in Manhattan. We have a very serious problem now in Manhattan with too many illegal immigrants who could be bringing with them health challenges, serious health challenges. They're certainly bringing crime challenges. Many of these people are actual criminals who have flooded into New York. There's not enough space. And even our brain dead mayor, who is certainly an idiot, and our brain dead governor, even they are finally saying, no, wait a minute, we have a southern border problem. We have a Canadian border problem. The federal government, the Biden administration is wrong. They've got to reverse course. With our country in this shape, we do not have the mind share and the resource share available, I don't think, to contemplate expanding and continuing this conflict and supporting Zelensky in Ukraine. We certainly don't have the ability to open up a second front over Taiwan or Asia or some other flashpoint. We need to retreat, and we need to get our basic, make Norway great again, make America great again, make individual countries great again. As for what the head of the European Union is going to say about anything, she should, I won't use the F word, but I'd like to. I mean, she should just zip it. Nobody cares what the European Union has to say. It's a project that's a disaster. And ask a private sector worker, ask a business person in Europe how much sense it makes to put more capital inside Europe right now. Doesn't make any sense.
Charles, on Monday we had municipal elections in Norway, and it was a blue wave, not in blue as in the U.S., but a conservative, allegedly, wave hit the Social Democrats, the Labour Party, and the Centre Party, formerly known as the Agrarian Party, midship. They lost badly in the elections, as did the Greens. But to my disappointment, a lot of other people's disappointment too, there was one new party that managed to break through the roof and made great progress. And they're against the EU. They're against the cables, electricity cables to the continent. They want to make Norway great again. Leave that aside. But that evening I spoke to some people and we were discussing what happened to all the village idiots. Before we used to have a lot of village idiots, even in Oslo. They were nice characters. Someone played the accordion, someone pretended to be an opera singer, and they did people no harm. Okay, they took a few beers now and then, but they didn't they didn't rob or steal or slash people with machetes. They were nice people. So we were discussing, where have they gone? I think you just gave me the answer. We sent them to the parliament.
Strasbourg.
Strasbourg, yeah, but we don't get to elect anyone in Strasbourg, but we have our own parliament filled with rather limited people. I shall not say anything further unless I will be carried away by the Fire Brigade too. Charles, I think this sums it up. Make sure to, everyone, make sure to follow us on document.news. Charles and I will be back with a new show next week. I think I will have some leaks emanating out of Charles's mail account this coming, so there might be another story coming with Charles in writing this weekend. Stay safe, stay calm, carry on, and see you next week. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you, Geir.
Neimen, hei! Har du også antistatlige holdninger? Ja, da har du kommet til rett sted. Da Dokk-TV noe for deg. Men for at vi skal kunne lage Dokk-TV, så vi avhengig av din støtte. Vips et bidrag til 63 89 41. Takk.